I'm going to be sharing with you verses from the Quran and sayings from the Hadith that will have you questioning whether or not the Islamic Mahdi and his partner Isa is the Christian Antichrist and the Christian false prophet. I mean, as these modern day events continue to happen before our very eyes, it's clear to me that Islam is on a very rapid and dangerous mission to colonize the earth with their Antichrist barbaric religion. Just look at what's happening around the world, especially in Europe right now. But many people are probably going to comment and say, oh, that's just terrorist groups. That's not the true Muslims. They don't really even have enough power to even change anything. Well, that's entirely false. In fact, at its height, the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, held about 1/3 of Syria and around 40% of Iraq. They ruled by fear. They kidnapped men and women and made them convert to their religion. They turned young boys into killers. They sold their young women as sex slaves. These were terrible people and are terrible people. Now, of course, I'm not referring to all Muslims. I'm referring to the ones that require and desire bloodshed. And as a young ex-ISIS member said in one of his most recent interviews, tell the people to not join the evil. Do not fall for the religion of peace bullcrap that you see in the news or on social media. This is not the religion of peace. It's a counterfeit to the true belief system, which is Christianity. Now, again, I would like to say that this is not an attack necessarily on Muslims, but rather their religion. There are Muslims that do not desire bloodshed and war, but genuinely just want to live in peace. However, their religion makes it very clear that this is not the traditional perspective on life. As citizens living in the 21st century, we are witnessing a global war between light and darkness. Here's what the Bible says about light and darkness. John 3:19 says, "And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil." Jesus is the light, and anything that stands in his way or pulls you away from him is of Satan. You might be thinking, especially if you're new here, why is this guy so passionate about this subject? Like, why does he even care about these other religions? Can't we all just peacefully live together? Well, no, because I love Christ and I desire for him to be exalted over everything. And what Islam does and these other religions is reduce Christ to a mere prophet who did not die for the sins of the world and resurrect, but rather escape to heaven to await a second coming, which we will get much more into detail later. And any religion that teaches that Christ did not die for the sins of the world and resurrect is not a godly religion. They are not of the truth. That religion would be considered an antichrist religion because they are simply opposed to Christ. And we know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. So by Islam denying the Son of God, they deny themselves entrance into heaven. I mean, 1 John 2:22 says, "Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son." So let's begin with the main focus of today's video. Our main focus is going to be on a very important figure in Islamic eschatology known as the Mahdi. If you've never heard of this figure before, then you are in for a treat. The Mahdi, according to the Islamic Hadiths, is the rightly guided one. He is given the name because he will supposedly be the restorer of religion and justice who will rule before the end of the world. Now, alongside the Mahdi, there's going to be a supernatural being named Isa, and this is the Islamic version of Jesus. We're going to go into great detail about him later in the video as well. These two Islamic figures are going to fight alongside each other against someone called the Dajjal, which is Islam's version of the Antichrist. Now, Muslims claim that the Dajjal is the Antichrist, but little do they know the Prophet Muhammad and the fake Jesus that they believe, that is the Antichrist. Those people are of the Antichrist spirit, which is exactly why I believe that the real Antichrist and the real false prophet will come from Islam. By the way, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and again, if you haven't been watching the news recently, then you are missing out on the most popular Muslim invasions all around the Western world. But let's move on to these Islamic hadiths. I mean, listen to these quotes. And by the way, for those that don't know, Muslims have the Quran, which is basically their holy book, while also having hadiths, which is a collection of narratives about the Prophet Muhammad. And if you ever get into a debate with a Muslim, you're going to notice that if you ever use a hadith to expose them, they're just going to cop out by saying, oh, that's a weak hadith, or oh, that hadith is taken out of context. So always be ready for that answer when debating anyone of Islam. But anyway, and sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but Sahih Bukhari, Volume 8, Book 73, Hadith number 224. Allah's apostle said, "The most awful name in Allah's sight on the day of resurrection will be that of a man calling himself Malik al-Amlak, which literally means King of Kings." Really? Allah's apostle? Muhammad says that a man calling himself King of Kings is the most awful name in Allah's sight on the day of resurrection? I wonder who is called the King of Kings in the Bible. Well, obviously, it's Jesus, the true Christ. Revelation 19:16 says, "On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords." Daniel 2:37 says, "You, O King, the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory." We know that Jesus is the King of Kings and the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Like, it's almost as if Satan himself was speaking through Muhammad and his writers in that hadith. The last apostle of Allah? I mean, what a joke. Christians, it's time to step up and realize the tactics of the enemy. For those that don't know, in my personal life, I am a basketball coach. And every chance I get, I watch the opponent's game film. This isn't to worship them or to even exalt them. This is so that I can see the opponent or the enemy's tactics and prepare for it. So I'm not showing you this to glorify Islam. I'm showing you this so that you are aware of the enemy's tactics. Islam is not your friend. Hinduism, the other secular religions of the world are not your friend. Anything that opposes Christ is not your friend. By no means am I calling for violence. In fact, we are supposed to do good to our enemies. I pray that all members of any religious group that are outside of Christ come to Christ. However, I am calling for awareness. We need to be aware of what the end times goal of Islam truly is and why Christians should think about it. Now, let's read from some more hadith collections on the so-called promised deliverer, the Mahdi. Book 31, 42-66. The Prophet said, "The religion will continue to be established until there are 12 caliphs over you, and the whole community will agree on each of them." I then heard from the Prophet some remarks which I could not understand. I asked my father, "What is he saying?" He said, "All of them will belong to Quraysh." And I know I probably pronounced that wrong, but let's pause for a second and think about that number. It's interesting that this hadith uses the number 12. We know as Christians that 12 is a very sacred number. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 sons of Jacob, 12 disciples, 12 pieces of bread in the tabernacle, 12 gates of heaven. I mean, the list literally goes on and on. But Islam is a counterfeit to the true belief system that is Christianity. So of course they would have a demonic counterfeit in the different numbers and different events in their end times. But let's keep reading. Book 31, 42-68. When he came back to his home, the Quraysh, however you say that, came to him and said, "Then what will happen?" He replied, "Then turmoil will prevail." So turmoil prevailing is going to happen after. We know as Christians that great turmoil and trouble will prevail during the end of days, so just keep that in mind. Book 31, number 4269. The Prophet said, "If only one day of this world remained, Allah would lengthen that day, till he raised up in it a man who belongs to me, or to my family, whose father's name is the same as my father's." Now listen carefully. "Who will fill the earth with equity and justice, as it has been filled with oppression and tyranny." Now think about this version. It says, "The world will not pass away before the Arabs are ruled by a man of my family whose name will be the same as mine." So Muhammad believed that there would be a man who had the same name as him who will fill the earth with equity and justice. Well, that's interesting because as Christians, we believe the Antichrist will be a man who brings a false sense of security and prosperity, or a temporary sense of equity and justice. But let's keep reading. Number 4272, book 31. The Prophet said, "The Mahdi will be of my stock, and will have a broad forehead and a prominent nose. He will fill the earth with equity and justice, as it was filled with oppression and tyranny." And here's the crazy part, "and he will rule for 7 years." So this Mahdi will bring equity and justice while ruling for 7 years? I mean, come on, they're just giving it away at this point. The book of Daniel shows us that the Antichrist will make a covenant for 7 years. Daniel 9:27 says, "And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator." Many biblical scholars agree that the times given in the book of Daniel are symbolic of years. So 1 week would literally be symbolic of 7 years, according to that standard. So, just like the Mahdi, the Antichrist will set up a covenant and rule for 7 years, or at least he will make it appear that way. By the way, for those that don't know much about the biblical Antichrist, here's some characteristics about him. He shall say in his heart, "I will be like the Most High." He shall stand up against the Prince of Princes. He shall exalt himself above every god. He shall exalt himself above all that is called God. And he shall deny both the Father and the Son, which we know Islam specifically does. He shall also make the earth tremble and shall shake kingdoms. Times and laws shall be given into his hand. Power shall be given to him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and the 10 kings, whoever that is, shall give their strength and power to him. Now, the more I keep reading about the Antichrist, I want you to imagine this Islamic Mahdi and tell me if you're making any connections. His coming shall be after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. He that ministers in his presence shall do great wonders, so that he shall make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and shall deceive them that dwell upon the earth by means of these miracles, which he shall have power to do. Now, here's the most important one in my opinion. He shall have power to give life to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should speak, and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. I genuinely think that this is the Mahdi, and this is Isa. And something really interesting to think about is the fact that Islam, according to many religious scholars, and even the religion of Islam itself, comes from Ishmael, dating all the way back to the days of Abraham. Old Testament. Literally, the book of Genesis. And this is where things get crazy. We know that Ishmael was born out of sin. We know that Abraham was instructed by God to have a child through Sarah, not Hagar. Well, Abraham and Sarah decided to have a lack of faith in God and do things their own way. So Sarah eventually told Abraham to have a child with Hagar because she thought she was too old. And this woman, Hagar, a slave woman, had a child named Ishmael with Abraham. Eventually, Abraham and Sarah decided to trust God, and they did have a child named Isaac, who is the promised seed. Isaac is the promised seed, not Ishmael, and here's my biblical evidence for it. When Abraham was commanded to take his son, Isaac, to the top of the mountain, God said something very interesting. He said, "Take your one and only son." Well, Ishmael was his son too. So it's weird that God used that language, "take your one and only son." To me, this is putting a great emphasis on Isaac. But Genesis 22 says, I think this means that one child was born from sin and the other was born from faith. So if Islam comes from Ishmael, does that mean that they were born from sin? I believe so. Also, for those that don't know, Ishmael had 12 sons. and Muslims believe that there are the 12 tribes of Ishmael. I mean, it couldn't be more of a counterfeit. We already talked about the biblical significance of the number 12. And we also talked about how Muhammad said that there will be 12 caliphs in the end times. So maybe the 12 sons and the 12 tribes of Ishmael is all connected. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all of his brothers, or his brethren. If this doesn't describe the history of the Muslim people, then I don't know what does. But let's move on to the mysterious figure known as Isa to the Muslims. I promised I would go into great detail about him, so let's do it. Isa, according to Muslims, is the true Jesus. He was miraculously born from the Virgin Mary. He performed many miracles, such as making the blind see and the deaf hear. And even according to Islamic belief, he created a live bird from clay. Now let me read this to you. He then took the clay and shaped it to resemble a bird. He then blew upon it, saying, "Be a living bird by the will of Allah." It became a live bird and flew away in the sky, spreading its wings. And once it disappeared from the public eye, turned back into clay. Now, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but when reading this, I noticed, wait a minute, is that a false sign? Like, their Jesus just created a false sign and wonder, just like the Antichrist will. And it reminded me of magicians that Moses went up against when they threw their staff down and it turned into a serpent. I don't know how they did that. I guess it was through magic, but that's kind of what their Jesus did. Because I guess it wasn't a live bird because it said that it turned back into clay. I don't know, maybe I'm reaching on that one, but that's what I saw. Now, there are 29 hadiths relating to the subject of Isa alongside the Mahdi, which is what we kind of talked about earlier. Jesus Isa will descend upon the earth from heaven and join the Mahdi along with his followers in the final days before the destruction of earth. The Mahdi will ask Jesus to pray, but Jesus will decline and follow the Mahdi. Here's a proof from a hadith that they believe this. Sahih Muslim Book 1, Hadith 293. I heard the messenger of Allah saying, "A group of my ummah will fight for the truth until near the day of judgment, when Jesus, the son of Mary, will descend. And the leader of them will ask him to lead the prayer, but Jesus declined, saying, 'No, verily among you Allah has made leaders for others, and he has bestowed his bounty upon them.'" What blasphemy to even pretend that Jesus is going to go, in a spiritual sense, bow down to this Islamic savior. I mean, what blasphemy. You can tell that this religion stems from Satan's imagination. Of course Satan wants the Son of God to bow down to him. He already asked him to do that in the Bible. But I can't even say Son of God, because Islam doesn't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. They even say that God can have no son. In the Quran, 112, 1-4, it says, "Say he is Allah, the one and only, Allah, the eternal, absolute. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like unto him." That's funny because the Bible claims that Jesus is God's one and only begotten son. So it is directly opposed. And for those that may not know, inside the Dome of the Rock, which is Islam's most famous shrine, are quotes from the Quran that manifest the Muslim view on Jesus, implying that he is just a prophet, but not the Messiah. He is not the son of Mary, but not the son of God, implying that he is just a prophet, but not the Messiah. He is the son of Mary, but not the son of God. Jesus clearly says in John 8:24, "I told you, you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins." By the way, the Dome of the Rock is believed by many to stand directly over the site of the Holy of Holies of both Solomon's Temple and Herod's Temple. Is this the abomination? I think so. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that they believe Isa will come back down from heaven and destroy the cross. While he, the Dajjal, will be engaged in all of this, Allah will send the Messiah, the son of Mary. He will descend by the white minaret in the east side of Damascus, wearing 2 garments dyed in saffron, placing his hands on the wings of 2 angels. While he will lower his head, water will drip from it, and when he will raise it, drops like pearls will scatter from it. Every disbeliever who will come in contact with his breath will die, and his breath will reach as far as he can see. He, Isa, will then pursue the Dajjal. Again, this is the Islamic Antichrist, until he catches him at the gate of Lod and will then execute him. Allah's prophet Isa and his companions will be put under siege to the extent that a bull's head to one of them will be better than 100 dinars to you today. And I think that that's a good correlation to when the Bible says that money will almost become worthless in the end of time, or basically a whole day's work will get you 1 piece of bread. But it goes on to say that Allah's prophet Isa and his companions will then beseech Allah. Consequently, Allah will send worms in the necks of Gog and Magog. That's very interesting. And as a result, they will all die at the same time. Gog and Magog? This is literally mentioned in the Bible, in Ezekiel and in the book of Revelation, but let's keep reading. The prophet of Allah, Isa, and his companions will then descend to the ground and will not even find enough space of a handspan that will not be filled with their decayed bodies and stench. Is this the part in the book of Revelation that speaks of the blood that comes up to the horse's face? I think so, because if you keep reading the Islamic text, it states another very similar end-time story. Allah's prophet Isa and his companions will then beseech Allah, and Allah will send birds that will resemble the necks of camels. The birds will carry their bodies away, throw them wherever Allah wills. Thereafter, Allah will send such rain that no mud house or hut will be sheltered from it. It will cleanse the earth until it leaves it like a mirror. The earth will then be told, "Bring forth your fruits and restore your blessings." That's interesting, because it's basically saying that Allah is going to send the birds to essentially clean everything up. Well, that sounds a lot like the following Bible verse in the book of Revelation. Revelation 19:17 through 18 says, "And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven," so the birds, "Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great." I mean, this is pretty crazy, right? Let's just keep reading, though, on what Isa is going to allegedly accomplish during his second coming. The Islamic text says Isa will descend to the earth. He will get married and have children. He will remain in the world for 45 years, and thereafter he will pass away and will be buried with Muhammad in the grave. I mean, this is so stupid. You can't make this stuff up. Muhammad was definitely seeing demonic visions. I mean, after all, Muhammad himself thought that he was demon-possessed when he had his first encounter with the supposed angel Gabriel. And I didn't really want to bring this up, but I was reading about Muhammad's early life, and some kind of medical condition was happening to him in the beginning of his life. And to me, when I was reading it, it looked like magic was placed upon him or was cast upon him. And I could be reaching on that, but I just want to say that so you can go do your own research and let me know. But listen to all these red flags of the hadith I'm about to read to you. Let me read to you from the Bukhari 9:111. He used to go, Muhammad, into the seclusion, the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone, continuously for many days and nights. He used to take with him the journey food, that stay, and then come back to his wife, Khadijah, and to take his food likewise again for another period to stay, until suddenly the truth descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came to him in it and asked him to read. The prophet replied, "I do not know how to read." The prophet added that the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and again asked me to read, and I replied, "I do not know how to read." Whereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it anymore. I mean, does this sound like a holy angel? But anyway, he then released me and asked me again to read, but again I replied, "I do not know how to read, or what shall I read?" Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me, and then released me and said, "Read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists, has created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is most generous, up to that which he knew not." Then Allah's apostle returned with the inspiration, his neck muscles twitching with terror, till he entered upon his wife and said, "Cover me, cover me." They covered him till his fear was over, and then he said, "Oh wife, what is wrong with me?" Then he told her everything that had happened and said, "I fear that something may happen to me." So this dude is in a complete state of shock. He is terrified of what just happened. And listen to what his wife says right here. His wife said, "Never, but have the glad tidings, for by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you, as you keep good relations with your kith and kin, speak the truth, help the poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving, calamity afflicted ones." But after a few days,